Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this clown decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today, just to get right into it, James Marriott, a Times columnist and relatively new one, as you can tell he's very young, wrote this on Twitter. I wrote this in defence of the liberal elite. I increasingly think liberal values like tolerance and free speech don't make intuitive sense to most people, and that to have a liberal society you may need an elite to impose those values from above. Which idiotically is saying the quiet part out loud. All the new elite tend to know you're not really supposed to say this directly, but given he's a new boy, he's fallen quite into the trap. And amazingly, no one's corrected him. So why we need the cultural elite more than ever? Anarchy on social media has proved you can't have tolerant and liberal society without ideas being filtered from above. This is effectively just another way of saying, I have a vision and I am anointed, and you plebs need to follow to the letter my liberal opinions, otherwise none of this is going to work. The thing James Marriott doesn't seem to understand is that this is exactly what has been happening for, well, I don't know, 10 years at the very least, possibly 20, maybe even 30. So to basically come out and say, right, what we've had isn't working, clearly we just need to do it harder, I mean, let's just go through his full opinion. The cultural elite are so widely despised at the moment that even quite unlikely enemies of entrenched privileges such as billionaire businessmen feel able to scorn them without fretting unduly over the appearance of hypocrisy. Well, being an elite doesn't necessarily mean you have lots of money. I would imagine as a young Times journalist in London, you don't feel particularly wealthy, yet you are still part of the new elite. How do I know? Well, you're writing absolute nonsense like this. In a piece in Saturday's Financial Times, the Silicon Valley financer Peter Thiel took a swipe at the distributed idea suppression complex, sinisterly acronized as DISC, which he defines as the media organisations, bureaucracies, universities and government-funded NGOs that traditionally delimit public conversation. Sweep aside this sinister apparatus of professors, TV producers and newspaper editors, and citizens will be free to seek the truth for themselves. Well, I don't think he's saying get rid of them and leave the plebs to do as they wish. I think he's saying, a lot like a lot of people in, say, Reform and Matt Goodwin are saying, is this new elite is not representing us. Can we please sweep them aside so that they can actually be replaced by people who are there to represent the general population? And let's be absolutely fair as well. I have literally never seen BBC Verify actually verify something correctly. Now, that's not to say that they have never verified something correctly. I think it'd actually be pretty impressive if they never have. However, the odd times that I do see them on Twitter, which to be fair through my algorithm is only when people are pointing out that they're wrong, is obviously showing me that they are wrong. And when you are called BBC Verify and are literally there to fact check and you're getting things wrong, you're not trustworthy, are you? Though Thiel's rhetorical thunderbolts arrived veiled in clouds of presentation and obscurity, his anti-elite tirade begins, ironically enough, with a meditation on the etymology of the ancient Greek word apocalypse. Okay, bit of a weird sentence. The core of his argument is nowadays blandly uncontroversial. The right loathe the cultural elite as patronising and out of touch. Well, yeah, they are. The left worry that it excludes marginalised voices. The idea that society requires a class of people who promote certain values and delimit public conversation has very few adherents nowadays. But it is a view to which I find myself increasingly sympathetic. Yeah, because you agree with the values being espoused by the new elite. Why is that? Well, having a quick look at his LinkedIn, he went to University of Oxford, which already new elite pumping station, in which he did his degree in English literature, again, a new elite pumping station, moved on to being a bookseller, so at least he's been in the private sector a bit, worked there for 3 years to then effectively go straight over to being a deputy books editor at the Times and then a columnist. And I can't imagine a rare bookseller is going to quite throw you into the real world anything like tech, manufacturing, industry, anything like that is going to do. In other words, he has surrounded himself with new elite for his entire life. Is it any wonder that he defends them? Anyway, as Thiel writes, the internet has radically democratized our culture. Facebook, and you're arguing against that, by the way. You know, this whole new elite god that is democracy, Well, you see, when it's not done through the official voting system, it's not real democracy, apparently. Facebook and X have broken the power of the mainstream media. Access to the public conversation, once restricted to a handful of people allowed to express their opinions in the Newsnight studio and on opinion pages, is now virtually unlimited. Yes, hello there, I am your competition, James. And in many ways this is a good thing. Okay, at least you can admit that. More voices and points of view are heard than ever before in history. It is undeniably true that the old cultural elite was flawed in many ways, biased, snobbish, self-satisfied, and all too obviously shaped by vested interest. And those who rage against the mainstream media are not wrong to point out that traditional media companies have never reflected every view under the sun. Well, that's not actually the argument from the anti-mainstream media crowd like me. The point isn't that they don't have every view under the sun. I'm not going to be mad if, on the BBC Horizon they talk about the Earth and don't have flat earthers on. Like, that's not the issue. The issue is that there is non-stop opinions from left liberal voices that will go on and on and on about how we need to be tolerant as a country, how immigration's actually great. But then you'll barely hear anything from the other side apart from the odd question time panelist, and even then they're typically booed down by the audience. Why? Because typically, for some reason, this is just the feeling people get considering all the polling that happens as well. But the BBC managed to find quite loud and quite numerous people who agree with the left liberal side, and then every now and then, once again, you'll get a based person who goes on about immigration not being great for them, bringing up anecdotes and bringing up data and statistics. Once again, just to be clear, the point people are making isn't that we need every single viewpoint under the sun to be put on the mainstream media. No, it's that we'd like the mainstream media to actually reflect when there are actually debates in society. And if you look at the mainstream media, you wouldn't think there's a big debate on immigration. You'd think it's just a fringe lunatic minority that wants immigration being brought down by about 1 million people a year. But then again, you get polls where a quarter of the country want to vote reform, so which is it? But it is also the case that our newly democratised culture has not, to put it mildly, heralded the arrival of an egalitarian paradise of reasoned debate. Yes, that's because people don't want egalitarianism. Basically, nobody has wanted egalitarianism apart from fringe communists. And you have taken on their language to try and initially, you may not realise it, but initially undermine their point on egalitarianism, but you've actually taken it on as one of your own. This is a man who is saying, I want egalitarianism, and then turning it around saying, actually, egalitarianism can only work if we have a hierarchy of opinions, and my opinions are at the top. So yeah, nice one. As it is now well documented, the advent of social media platforms has brought about rising political extremism, metastasizing conspiracy theories, growing hostility to science, and the shattering of the mainstream into 1,000 different realities that are increasingly alien to one another. I think this all will have happened regardless of social media or not. I think what happened is social media came about, and the mainstream media overcompensated by effectively trying to become blatant propaganda machines, but the propaganda kept turning out to be wrong. Modern citizens differ on matters that once seemed so obvious that they hardly worth discussing. Who won the American election? Well, Donald Trump this time around. Do vaccines work? Yes. But again, that's not the question. The question is, why are kids in America given hepatitis vaccines? What is a woman? Well, at least that's one you can't blame on the right. True, many more views are heard, but the result is chaotic. Well, yeah, debates are chaotic. That's the point. This is exactly what people who want to debate were expecting. What are you talking about? The problem is that a successful society requires a shared moral and cultural reality. True. A democracy whose citizens are divided not only on policy but on fundamental questions of what is and isn't true will grow increasingly dysfunctional, as anyone who pays attention to American politics will have noticed. Yes, once again, very true. The version of reality believed in by the complacent and sometimes self-serving cultural elites had many shortcomings. Yes, true. A chastening discovery of the 21st century is that a flawed consensus may be preferable to anarchy. Well, it depends what the consensus is. The problem is, once again, he brings up what is a woman before. That was the cultural elite bringing up that problem. You can't put that one down to Twitter. That was the cultural elite's fault. Indeed, the public conversation in the age of social media has revealed that many people are not as keen on liberal democratic values as the old cultural elite might fondly have imagined. No, this is the new cultural elite, by the way, this isn't the old one. The old cultural elite definitely were not in favour of free speech. They were happy with any call for a republic to be considered treason. Anybody who has spent much time on X will have noticed that values such as free speech, equality and tolerance simply do not seem to make much intuitive sense to many people. No, free speech does. I don't know what you're on about with free speech. Equality and tolerance, though, well, the question with tolerance is where's the line? Do we have to accept foreign criminals to stay in the country and stay in our prisons? Do we have to accept, in terms of equality, that, say, a window cleaner should earn as much as a brain surgeon? Probably not. And you don't agree with this either, so I don't know why you're pretending that these have ever been widely held values and beliefs. Given half a chance, an awful lot of people, even those who think of themselves as liberal, would prefer to silence and abuse their enemies rather than tolerate views they disagree with. Yet this is what was happening on Twitter before Musk took over, by the way. This is what the liberals were doing. Many of the endless petty campaigns to censor books and silence speakers are in essence populist movements that would have struggled to get to the same purchase in the more elitist cultural environment of the 20th century. I'm sorry, but Jordan Peterson, there were many attempts to get him cancelled, and he's still doing world tours. Let's not pretend that the people calling for these university cancellations and things like that, let's not pretend that this is democratization. Most people still like J.K. Rowling, despite the fact that people tried to cancel her. Graham Linehan, people managed to actually cancel him to the point his marriage ended. People still like him. He's got a job in America now, thank God for that. Whenever I tell people that there was going to be a stage musical of Father Ted, they say, well, what happened to it? It's like, well, he got cancelled, didn't he? And everyone I know would have liked to have seen it. Why are you trying to pretend that the anti-free speech brigade are the people on Twitter who are happy that they've got their accounts back? Why would you even pretend that that is the case here? Even more alarming, he says, is the fact that support for democracy among young people has been falling since the advent of social media. We should be grateful that anti-democratic sentiment was one idea effectively suppressed by the elites who ran the distributed idea suppression complex. Okay, hang on. What are you actually going to do when it's a popular idea to have, I don't know, an absolute monarchy, or at the very least reduced suffrage, than to have universal suffrage? What are you actually going to do when that's the popular opinion? Because at that point, if your ideas are literally outweighed by the people you share a country with, there's not an awful lot you can do. You're the ones that wanted universal suffrage. If that has led to a restriction in suffrage, how can you actually stop that? Well, you're going to have to start acting like an oligarchy. Well, you already do that, actually, so you have to come up with better ideas. What effectively James is saying here is that he doesn't actually have decent arguments for any of these things. He's not really made the arguments. He's just assuming that they are better without really giving any support to his views. And because he thinks he's better, and because he is clearly quite thankful that the new elite are on his side, he wants to be part of that new elite that is just enforcing this. Well, it's not going to last, I'm afraid. You better thank God that it's Reform who are popular on the right at the moment, because largely they don't want to overturn things like free speech. And they are still to the point of tolerance where, they're not white nationalists or anything like that and never have been. But if they fail, things are only going to get more radical from what I can see. I don't see how you can't allow at least some of this pressure to be relieved and still stay in your position as the arbiter of what is moral and what is not. Your time's coming to an end, I'm afraid, and this being your defence of the cultural elite, I just think the ideas are good, makes me feel fuzzy, it's not going to make you last. Avowed enemies of democracy would find it hard to get a position reporting for the BBC or teaching at a British university. Yeah, once again, he's trying to say that on his side of the argument there is free speech, and then at the same time, criticisms of democracy, or avowed enemies as he's put it, are not allowed to report for the BBC or to teach at British universities. This isn't even true, by the way, because British universities, and not just the BBC, but pretty much the entirety of the liberal left media establishment, do you remember Brexit? Do you remember that democratic process? Do you remember all the cope and seething happening at British universities and at the BBC and other media outlets, coming up with all sort of excuses as to why Brexit should either be watered down or not happen at all? This is why nobody takes the cultural elite seriously, because you will have raging contradictions like this. You know, there's a flawed consensus and then there is just outright contradictions, and this is an outright contradiction. But plenty of people with those views have found huge and influential platforms online. Yeah, it's true. Fine, we can't get it on the BBC, we'll get people to pay us online instead. Again, I'm only against universal suffrage insofar as everyone should still be able to try and earn their vote. I would technically, in theory, be fine with universal suffrage if everyone did their 2 years of military work, or, something along those lines. It may be that liberal and democratic values do not arise naturally from the masses of the population when they are thrown together online. It's total nonsense, that, by the way. British democratic history, as David Starkey constantly points out, is people who feel that they have been left out saying, "Can I please join in?" It was, the democratic process actually led to people being more and more involved in the franchise. The problem we have now is that that's all being taken for granted. And this is why I think we keep voting in lazy politicians, because people are lazy with their vote, so you get what you vote for. Liberalism has always been a counterintuitive creed that appeals more to the intellect than the emotions. Again, this is just nonsense. Depends what type of liberalism he means again. If he means, fourth or fifth layer, if you don't know what I mean, I've got another video on it, link in the description. But if he means liberalism in the very 21st century sense, then yes, it's more an appeal to intellect, or at least rationalisation than emotion. The problem is that a lot of liberals don't realise that their, triple-digit IQ, just by the way, is more there actually used in justifying their emotions than actually being any sort of rationalist critical thought. And that's exactly what's happening here, by the way. He's kind of just given you these are good things and values as a given, rather than actually trying to defend them here. He doesn't feel a need to defend them, and he's got this emotive response to people actually having arguments against them, and instead of having to actually rationalise and understand what the opposite arguments to these are, which I have gone through in many videos before and argued against when I don't agree with them, instead of doing something like that, he's just saying, I should be put in charge to shut these people down. It's pretty much all he said. A lot of people do not find it natural to treat their hated enemies with respect and tolerance. Yes, well, Jesus told us that we should probably love our enemies. We may discover that you can't have a tolerant and democratic liberal society without a cultural elite imposing those strange ideas from above. Generally, people are not of the opinion that even if you hate your enemies, you should say kill them or suppress them. Alas, here you are saying that I have hated enemies and I think I should suppress them. Effectively, that is what you're saying here. I know you're saying that you want to have free speech, but effectively what this whole article has actually been saying is that free speech for me but not for thee. That is effectively the position you are in right now, and you don't even realise you've contradicted yourself numerous times in this article. I hope it is clear that my defence of cultural elites is the result not of gleeful snobbery, but of ruthful pragmatism. It is pragmatic of me to not even bother trying to understand why there may be a rise in anti-democratic sentiment, why there may be a rise in anti-tolerant sentiment, or why there might be a rise in support for free speech. No, instead, I am just the type of person that should be on above. I'm not a snob whatsoever, I'm just being pragmatic. You need to shut up. Doesn't sound very pragmatic to me, it sounds zealous. Completely zealous for left liberalism. Fifth wave liberalism, if you will, or progressivism. What you have done here is said, I am a progressive, I can't really think of good arguments against all these, so I'm just going to shut them down instead. The whole point of Elon Musk buying X was to improve freedom of speech and actually have these conversations. And your reaction to that is to just say, can't be bothered. How are you an opinion columnist if you're not even going to justify your opinions? It's insane. There's not even any justification to say that Elon Musk buying X has led to destabilisation. Post Elon Musk buying X, we've not had a January 6th. We've not had really any... Realistically, thinking back to it actually, when it comes to the riots in the summer, everyone was arrested for posting to Facebook, which again was supposed to be suppressing misinformation. It didn't No, nobody, I think. Well, there will have been people who went to jail for Twitter, but from what I remember, the high-profile cases, it was either people posting to TikTok or posting to Facebook, and both of those are quite censorious social media platforms. There will have been people who went to jail for posting on X. I have no doubt about that. But the very high-profile ones, the woman in Cheshire who was speculating about the origins of the stabber of those poor girls. That was done on Facebook. The very censorious platform, famously censorious actually. It's going through a bit of a change now, obviously, but as I say, an awful lot of these people were banned. Well, I don't even think they were banned from Facebook, but they were arrested for things being said on Facebook. It was less so for things on X. So this place where free speech is actually bound, people don't appear to be abusing it, unlike places where the boomers are. Anyway, he finishes off, I am no special fan of elites, and I would very much like to believe in a world in which all voices can be heard equally, and all value systems constantly granted a hearing. It is simply that I am not sure that utopia is possible. See, I'm just going to translate for you. What he's really worried about is that his positions are becoming unpopular, and he's having effectively a crisis of morality. And he doesn't, because he's such an NPC, and this was a very NPC article, he's worried that because of that, if the popular opinion goes against what his opinions are now, he won't feel good about it in the future. So his answer to that is, instead of actually trying to either reevaluate his morality or try and actually justify his morality, he's just basically saying, I want to be in charge of opinions so I don't have to think about it. That's what's happening here. Because frankly, in the past, when we had a completely different set of elites, one that wasn't harking on about democracy, tolerance, equality, all this Marxist nonsense, we actually had a more successful and just country that was constantly improving. We've had these elites pretty much fully in charge for, 3 decades now, something like that. And, riding off the coattails of Thatcher and the Tory government of the 80s and 90s, led to Tony Blair having a pretty good time with all that surplus. But everything post the 2008 crash, it's just been stagnation. Nobody really has felt better off than they did in 2008. Well, obviously there'll be some people who feel better off, but realistically, your average 30-year-old feels completely hard done by. Doesn't feel like there's any route to becoming the success that he saw from his parents in Monday Britain. Hence, as I keep saying, an awful lot of people I know really want to move country. My girlfriend keeps saying she wants to move to Canada. And I do have sympathy for it, but at the end of the day, I think with the direction the rest of the world's going, Britain probably won't be too far behind. And in fact, I think it will be the best at finding the best way to make it through these shifts in values. But I want to make one thing very clear to James here. What he is suggesting here leads to very bad outcomes. Ones that are being talked about today, in fact. Pubs could ban patrons from talking about transgender rights. Overheard conversations could amount to harassment of staff. Equality and Human Rights Commission warns. Yeah, James, by the way, you saying, the cultural elite from on top, they actually should dictate to society what they should do. They actually go beyond what 1984 thought would happen. Even in 1984, you were free to speak in the pubs. That is how crazy the modern world is, and you are justifying it. The government has been warned by the new elite that James is defending that rules could disproportionately curtail freedom of expression and be applied to overheard conversations. Do you understand now why there is an awful lot of anti-elite sentiment going around, James? Do you understand why the common man might not like this? Ministers have proposed that employers must protect workers from being harassed at work by third parties, such as customers or clients. If they fail to do so, they could be sued. Oh my god, everyone working in support, all of a sudden they're going to get big payouts from this. Seriously, is that what the Employers' Rights Bill has? That employers must protect their clients from third-party aggression? Have you ever worked in support? Have you ever worked in customer service? That's going to be replaced with AI in no time. However, the Equality and Human Rights Commission said this was particularly challenging in cases involving philosophical beliefs, such as people's views on religion or women's rights, because many business owners do not understand such topics are protected by the equality law. Yeah, once again, I've read enough here. This is the exact type of nonsense that James is defending. It's exactly what he's defending. He likes equality law. He wants equality law to carry on as it is. He doesn't like the fact that there are people out there who question the equality law. And to James, there is absolutely no reason to defend this whatsoever. He doesn't feel the need to defend this at all. He probably actually might disagree with it, but he will say, oh, this is just a flawed part of our consensus, you just have to live with it. And he doesn't seem to realise that people are saying, no, you probably don't actually have to change too much about liberalism. You have to probably change a couple of major aspects of it, and people would probably be happy. One, just get rid of the blank slatism. All people around the world, even in Britain itself, are not the same. There are individuals who are just naturally aggressive, and trying to integrate them into society can be very difficult. And as these people fail to actually integrate into society, they end up in jail. And restorative justice, frankly, not always actually going to work. That's just one example of how the blank slatism of progressivism is just total nonsense. People are not just economic units that will just take on whatever culture that they jump into. There actually has to be efforts to integrate them. And while that is majorly true of foreigners, it is also true of some of our homegrown native people. Some are just naturally tended towards aggression and criminality. That has to be dealt with in some way, even if it's just putting them in jail forever because they keep committing crimes. That's the point of jail. It keeps them out of society so that we can actually live peaceful, fulfilling, prosperous lives. I mean, doing those couple of things alone would probably change major aspects of Britain. All I've really asked for there is to effectively have a sensible immigration policy and actually deal with crime. Those two things might actually be two major ways to help Britain, but also you got to get rid of equality. If people are frankly not born the same, I mean, they are obviously all born in the image of God, but that then does not imply that naturally people are all the same. I mean, we know this from physical defects. Why can't we accept it with some mental ones too? Even subtle ones. I'm not even just talking about severe autism or things like that. I'm talking of just, I mean, intelligence could be one. There are people that just can't pick things up as well as other people. And so from there is absolutely no reason to actually try and have an equal society outside of equality under the law. And even all that means is that everyone has a right to a fair trial and to be judged by their actions as whether they're criminal or not criminal. It doesn't really mean an awful lot more than that. You know, for instance, it would make sense where if a crime results in a fine, that's actually based on the person's income rather than a fixed penalty notice in some cases. But anyway, stop trying to redistribute wealth. That's effectively what I'm trying to say. Something like a third of our budget is directly towards redistributing wealth. That needs to be cut down to like basically nothing. Those three major things get fixed by the new elite, and you can, have the rest of your ridiculous viewpoints as well. And people will probably just basically ignore you. But you can't have that. No, you need to effectively defend banning people talking in pubs. Where do you think that's going to lead to? Do you think this is people going to say, you know what, maybe he's right, maybe the liberal elite do need to be allowed to dictate to us plebs what's being said? No, they're going to go even worse with their anti-elite sentiment. And it really doesn't help that Ian Hislop was actually in the comments of this article saying that these were wise words from James Marriott. There are such things of truth and learning. When we cast them aside, we begin the slow descent towards a totalitarian society. Again, it is James here who is saying that we need a totalitarian society, and then for some reason, pretending that it's the people that Musk has allowed to be unleashed that have cancelled people speaking at universities. Talk about throwing aside truth. Populism always ends in revolution or tyranny because it knows no values other than those of the mob. I'm sorry, did Donald Trump the first time around become a tyrant? No, he didn't. Okay, you got January 6th. Did he cede power? Yes. Did he come back and win by democratic means? Yes. Is he going to be a tyrant this time? Well, it wasn't the first time. Why would he bother the second time? The Swedes, they've gone right-wing and populist. Are they a tyranny now? No, of course not. I hate Ian Hislop. Do we really wish to betray those who came before us and for centuries strove for a just and fair society? Are you seriously trying to say that people like Gladstone and Disraeli would think that the society we have now was in their vision of a just and fair society? Do you think they think it's just and fair that grooming gangs were covered up for years, and even trying to talk about it now can land you in jail. Do you think that the people who fought in World War II to stop the spread of tyranny throughout Europe, do you think they think that particular aspect of British life is just and fair? No, of course not. Why are people rising up against the elite and pretty much all of their opinions? Because it is the elite that have put us in this mess and made the average 30-year-old feel like he has nowhere to go apart from away from Britain. And there are those of us who don't want to do that, so of course we're fighting you, who is making the country much worse. Anyway, I think you get the idea with this. It turns out that the new elite are learning absolutely nothing from the past few years, so you're just going to have to fully back reform because they're the anti-establishment party, and the only one that's getting any sort of success. So there you go. That's our mission for the next 4 years. Keep giving them middle fingers in elections. Anyway, with that, I think that's where I'll leave the video for today. So tonight it's Tosh News, so do come along to join us over on the Worcester Club while we go through the news stories of the week. On Saturday it's Laughing at the Guardian, so do look forward to that too. Videos out as and when I can make them. When it comes to supporting the channel, obviously subscribe, leave a comment, like it. They're just free ways and direct ways to help the video and with it in the algorithm. If you really like my stuff, you can become a member for £2 a month, or send super chats and super thanks if you think I've done particularly good on a particular video or stream as well. But as I say, I'll leave it there. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.